So apparently the new Michael movie is sanitized, soulless, a wax museum, safe, and emotionally hollow. Yeah, and apparently I'm supposed to pretend this movie wasn't one of the most entertaining musical biopics we have gotten in years because some critics discovered the word whitewash and decided to hit copy and paste on every review like it's a fucking side quest objective. Because I gotta be honest, watching critics review this movie felt less like film criticism and more like watching someone angrily Yelp review a roller coaster because it didn't teach them tax law. Like, brother, it is a Michael Jackson movie. You walked into a movie about arguably the greatest performer in human history and got mad because people were moonwalking instead of sitting in a dimly lit room discussing litigation documents. I think I said that word right. I don't know. I might be slow. Anyway, before most people start typing paragraphs with veins popping out of their forehead in my comment section, let me make something perfectly clear. You can acknowledge controversy exists without pretending the movie failed because it focused on Michael Jackson and not his allegations. Keep in mind what I just said. The movie focused on Michael Jackson. That was its whole point. It's just Michael Jackson being Michael Jackson. Like, that's not a shocking creative decision to want to do for a biopic at all. Especially if you're covering certain dates, you know. Like, I don't know. People really just don't know what they're talking about before they go and sit into a movie, because before this movie came out, they had said this doesn't cover those parts in his life. Okay, I don't know. But here's the funniest part. A lot of these critics are acting like the movie ignored these events that literally happened after the timeline of the movie. The movie ends in 1988. The first allegations happened in 1993. That's not avoiding history. That's just called a timeline. And that's how linear storytelling works. That's how time functions. I know modern media literacy is just hanging on by a thread held together with Gorilla Glue and Twitter arguments, but come on. That's like watching Oppenheimer and then getting mad because they didn't show him discovering Instagram Reels or some shit. Yeah, the movie was decent, but where was TikTok? Brother, the year was 1945. I don't know. Shitty example, but whatever. But look, I understand some people wanted a darker, more investigative film. Cool. That's a valid preference. But critics didn't review the movie they got. They reviewed the movie they wanted. That's the problem. Because if you actually judge the film on what it's trying to do, it succeeds massively hard. The performances, fantastic. The stage recreations, actually amazing. Jafar Jackson, bro, this man didn't play Michael Jackson. This dude literally got possessed by him. There are moments in this movie where your brain literally stops processing information because your eyes are telling you it's Michael Jackson resurrected through black magic and unpaid overtime. The mannerisms, the voice, the posture, the little head tilts, the eye movements. It's actually uncomfortable how accurate it all is. Half the audience that we were with me and my friends, looked like they were about to start checking for pulse activity. And the critics still went, yeah, but the narrative complexity. Brother, he just did the entire Billie Jean performance frame for frame. What more do you want from him? A fucking TED Talk? One review compared the movie to being frog marched through a wax museum. First of all, that's such a critic sentence. Nobody in real life has ever said frog marched. That's a sentence created in a lab by a man who drinks sparkling water aggressively. Second, even if it is a greatest hits experience, why is that automatically bad? You're talking about Michael Jackson. The man's greatest hits are more culturally important than most artists' entire existence. You could play 45 minutes of MJ performances with zero dialogue, and people would still leave happier than after most Oscar bait movies where two sad British people stare out a rainy window for 3 hours discussing emotional suppression or some shit. Critics act like when a biopic entertains audiences is like, disturbing. And I just want to talk about this weird disconnect from critics and just actual viewers, because it's been going on for years, if not I can't even tell you how long it's been going on. It's been going on that long because critics torch this thing. Meanwhile, audiences, from what I've seen, were just treating these theaters like fucking concerts, alright? People were dancing, singing, showing up dressed like MJ, actually feeling something. And that's the part critics keep missing. Movies are emotional experiences. Not every film needs to dissect morality like it's a college ethics assignment written by some fucking dude named Sebastian. Sometimes people want spectacles, inspiration, or they just want to watch one of the greatest entertainers ever become larger than life on a giant screen. And this movie delivers that hard. But instead, critics, kept hammering the same point. It's sanitized, it's careful, it avoids controversy. Okay, now let's apply that standard equally, because the internet loves pretending critics are consistent. They are not. People immediately brought up Elvis for a reason. The movie was praised for style, energy, music, spectacle, and performance. Sound familiar? But suddenly, with Michael, critics just acted like every biopic must now function at a 6-hour courtroom documentary narrated by depression. And listen, I'm not saying every criticism is invalid. The movie definitely follows biopic formula sometimes. Some side characters feel underdeveloped. The pacing occasionally jumps around like you drink 6 Red Bulls. Fair criticisms. But some reviewers acted like this movie personally stole converters off their fucking car. One critic I saw basically talked about the film Antonian broke into his house and replaced his family photos with moonwalking PNGs. Just relax, bud. And another thing, people keep saying this movie is a state-controlled propaganda. Okay, probably to some extent, but are we seriously pretending every major biopic isn't curated? Because if you start applying full moral consistency to Hollywood biopics, half the genre evaporates instantly like Thanos snapped the screenplay department. Biopics are almost always selective with the information they want to give out and the information they choose to keep from a person's life. That's not new. Bohemian Rhapsody got accused of sanitizing. Straight Outta Compton got accused of sanitizing. Rocketman literally dramatized entire emotional realities. That's how this genre works. But with Michael, people approached it like it had to solve world peace. And I can't even say the word, but I'm not even gonna, try and pronounce it. Solve 30 years of public discourse simultaneously. No movie was surviving these expectations. None. And honestly, some critics already made up their minds before the film even released. You could just feel it. The reviews read less here's how the movie functions, and just more here's how I feel about Michael Jackson as a historical figure. Those are not always the same conversation. Again, you can dislike Michael Jackson. You can believe the allegations. You can think the movie should have addressed more. That's all fair. But that still doesn't magically make the filmmaking bad, because the technical craftsmanship here is undeniable. The concert recreations are phenomenal. The choreography is ridiculous and accurate to what actually happened in real time. The sound design is like fantastic. Production value is huge, and Jafar Jackson creates this movie like rent is due fucking tomorrow morning. The dude was locked in, and the audience is clearly connected with it because the people and the movie exploded commercially about it. Despite critics trying to like perform an exorcism on Rotten Tomatoes with like a 33%. That gap between critics and audiences, that's important because it proves something. People are getting tired of critics acting like emotional enjoyment is somehow intellectually inferior. Sometimes audiences just want to feel awe again. And Michael Jackson, regardless of controversy or how you see him, represented awe for millions of people. The movie tapped into that feeling, that electricity, that larger than life energy. And critics kept responding like, yeah, but what about thematic ambiguity? Brother, he just did Smooth Criminal. Read the move. Unfortunately, he did not do Smooth Criminal. Also, side note, I love how some critics called the movie safe. Safe? First off, the first 10 minutes, Michael's just getting beaten by his dad, okay? I watched that part, and I nearly started fucking breaking down, because I have trauma with that, okay? And that was, to be expected out of a Michael movie. This movie is about one of the most controversial celebrities in modern history. There is literally no safe version of making this movie with all the stuff he went through at such a young age. And they did cover a lot of that, even if it wasn't fully, going into deep depths of what the fuck his dad would do to him, or, the media stress, this, that, and the fourth. But yeah, I feel like the discourse from this movie was cooked from frame one. Okay, Twitter was already drafting essays before the popcorn finished popping. People had taken loads into that chamber like it was the wild standoff. And honestly, the fact the movie still resonated with audiences despite all that is impressive. Because if critics were right and this thing was truly some irredeemable disaster, audiences wouldn't be responding like this. And cinema score, massive audience scores, huge box office. At some point, you have to accept maybe normal people value entertainment differently than critics, who describe lighting choices like they're decoding ancient scripture. And look, I'm not saying critics are useless. Good criticism matters, especially in the industry that we live in. But modern film criticism sometimes feels just a little allergic to sincerity. Everything has to be cynical, detached, analyzed. Meanwhile, audiences are sitting there yeah, man, I don't know, the moonwalk scene made me feel alive again, because it did. And honestly, that matters more than people admit, because movies are supposed to create emotion, and Michael does that. It reminds people why Michael Jackson became Michael Jackson. Not just the controversy, not just the tabloid era, not just the headlines. The artistry, the performance, the obsession with perfection, the sheer gravitational pull he had as an entertainer. The movie captures that beautifully, and critics got obsessed with what the film made, and they ignored what it accomplished. What is ironic, considering Michael Jackson himself spent his entire career dealing with people reducing him to headlines instead of artistry. And that parallel is kind of actually wild. How even in death he's still getting shit. And before someone in the comments says, so you think the movie is flawless? No, absolutely not. But the way critics talked about this film, you'd think Antoine Fuqua, or whatever the fuck his name is, released 2 hours of Michael Jackson Fortnite dances over stock ukulele music. The movie is good. Not perfect, not revolutionary, not flawless, but good. And way better than the discourse surrounding it. honestly, the funniest thing about this whole situation is that critics accidentally helped the movie, because every time someone posted some instantly dramatic review headlines, normal people became more curious. They're like, this movie is morally catastrophic. An indefensible whitewash, a hollow fantasy. Now I gotta go see it. You made it sound like the forbidden tomb of cinema. Honestly, and then audiences watched it and went, wait, this is actually pretty entertaining. Like, that was gonna be some shocking development from what we got from the trailers and shit. You know, it's almost like regular humans enjoy music, charisma, spectacle, dancing, emotion, and giant cinematic performances. Like, that's some type of groundbreaking revolution. But at the end of the day, the Michael movie succeeds because it understands something critics forgot. Michael Jackson wasn't just a celebrity. He was an experience. And the movie captures that experience. The energy, the scale, the madness, the obsession, the magic, and honestly, for 2.5 hours, I feel like that's enough.